With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Single Muslims Live, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com with me, Nazia, Khatun. We are live here on Sky Channel 752 and across Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and YouTube. Wherever you're watching, a very welcome. You too can join in with tonight's discussion and get advice by simply calling through to the studio on 019 24 231 083. Standard networks rates apply. Please ensure you have all the bill payers' permission before calling, or why not share your thoughts via WhatsApp in confidence by messaging us on 079 507 97017. I got that right, hopefully. Our guest tonight is Sulthana Ahmed. She is a GP from Leeds, and we'll be talking about relationships, mental health, and self-love. And I just want to welcome Sulthana. Lovely to have you on our show today. Can you hear me?
Assalamu alaikum. Yes, I can hear you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Pleasure. First of all, before I even ask you any questions or anything, how have you been?
Oh, that's so sweet of you. I've been good. I've been good, thank you. Been having lots of kind of deep conversations with friends and family about everything that's been going on, but I'm good, and I hope you are too.
I mean, we've all had different kind of emotional meltdowns. We've been on a high, we've been on a low. But I'm assuming as a GP, you are getting the highest of everything right now with people going through lots of issues. What's the main thing you're dealing with at the moment?
So I work in a kind of regular GP practice.
Right.
So a lot of our consultations are now over the phone, email, or video consultations. What I have noticed since the lockdown is just a massive spike in mental health consultations. It's astonishing the number of patients who ring in struggling with their mental health. People who have been stable for years are suddenly having relapses, or people who have never had issues before having issues now, or people with pre-existing issues just getting worse. So that is definitely the theme of a lot of my consultations at the moment.
Wow. I mean, we're in the third lockdown, and I know it's been very difficult compared to the first one, the second one. And I'm sure the weather's not really helping us at the moment. And people are going through all kind of stuff, mental health being the first one at the top. I mean, how would you advise people to cope during these tough times? What are your solutions? What have you been advising people mostly?
Yeah, so I think coping strategies is really difficult to give a blanket answer because it's so unique to an individual person. I guess I want to say three main things about coping during this lockdown. Number one is to think of your body and mind as a tool. So you really need to look after your body and your mind. If you look after them, you treat it well, you're going to get better results whatever you're trying to do. And that includes really basic things like, sleeping enough, eating enough, keeping yourself hydrated, making sure you get enough exercise. So really trying to make sure that your physical health is looked after and not neglecting that. The other things that I tend to advise my patients is variable, because obviously how you cope depends on your personality, your past experiences, what's worked for you in the past, and things like that. And generally what I ask people to do is think about what they are exactly struggling with and how they can, rectify that. So almost like a problem-solving approach. And also stressing about things like, trying to maintain emotional connections with people, whether it's over Zoom, FaceTime, WhatsApp, trying to keep those conversations going so that you don't feel isolated. Because the main thing people are really struggling with is the lack of social connection with their loved ones, their friends and family. It's quite difficult because obviously the types of activities you can do is really limited at the moment. So I also try and encourage patients to do something every day that really makes them happy. So it sounds really simple, but it's actually quite effective and also quite variable. So it could involve things like painting, reading, writing, exercising, drawing, like anything that brings you joy. I would make it a priority and try and schedule that into your day-to-day. And obviously, if you've tried all of those mindful things, like a lot of patients have been, and it's just not working and you're still struggling, then we welcome patients to come back, speak to us again, and then we may utilise professional help if needed as well.
Lovely. I love what you said right at the beginning about physical health, looking after your diet. I'm a fitness coach, and every morning I'm waking up. That's the only thing that's keeping me on top of my emotions. It's the only thing that's allowing me to actually survive right now in this third lockdown. In the first two lockdowns, I was thriving, I was blossoming, I was doing things, I was taking a break. But this lockdown has been very, very different. It's been very congested, if that's the right word. And I feel like the pressure point probably has popped for so many people. Now, coming back to fitness and health, and I'm going to bring this back to South Asian and our community. We're both from Bangladesh, right?
Yes. Oh, I didn't know you.
I mean, I know for too long being in this industry that we don't take our health and fitness for a priority. From a doctor, GP's perspective, how important, can you like just stress this to our audience, like how important our fitness and our health is right now? Drinking water, getting enough sleep, getting sunlight, getting the walks, getting exercises. In your opinion, how important is it?
I mean, I would go as far as to say that it is probably the most important thing. A lot of the time, patients come to us wanting a bit of a magic pill, something that I can give them that will make all of their problems go away and it will make them feel better. But that's not, unfortunately, how it works. And I try and stress to patients that when you exercise, it's not just about your cardiac health or your lungs or your muscles. When you exercise, your brain releases so many happy hormones, kind of rewarding hormones, feel-good hormones. And most people will agree that after they have exercised or they eat healthy for a week, they physically feel fantastic. And your body is just made to move. And if you are able to consistently engage in exercise, many patients have come back saying to me that their mood is better. And in fact, I think one of the reasons why people are struggling even more so this time is because the gyms are closed. It is dark and gloomy outside and they're not as motivated to get exercise going, but it's important to try and persevere with it and do as much as you can at home.
Oh, Sultana, I love you already, honestly. You're preaching exactly what I say to people. And even though the gyms are closed, I mean, for me, it's been a struggle, but I have this saying, your body is the first gym. We have to understand that we didn't have gyms many years ago. We still did things. Our movement comes from the way we think as well. And when we change our physiology, our mindset changes. So that's really amazing to hear. My second question really is about, this topic is about lockdown love and self-care. And I've been talking to a lot of my clients, and one of the things that's been coming up is the lack of self-love has gone down and is affecting their relationship with their partners. Do you think lockdown has had a negative effect on people's relationship, marriages, especially during this time, more so than the first two?
So this is actually quite a difficult question to answer because when there is a point of crisis or something that people are struggling with, not all relationships will respond in a uniform fashion. So there was definitely some research at the start where couples actually found that they found comfort in their relationships, and the lockdown kind of drew them closer together. Now, we don't know how long that will last, and we don't know actually as time goes on and the pressure continues to be applied whether things will actually reverse. So a lot of scientists do say that we need to do kind of more up-to-date research now to see how couples are faring when there is a bit of an enforced closeness that they've not picked. And one key point to mention is we can't ignore that the police during the summer did say that there's an increase in domestic violence abuse that has been reported and things like that. So I think that's a little bit of a snippet to the window that definitely couples are struggling. I think the main thing is if you were a couple that were able to conflict resolve before the pandemic, chances are you will probably be okay. Whereas if you were a couple that was struggling before, you will really have to try and, you know, draw on your support network to try and buffer the negative effects of the pandemic on your relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And I just want to also mention to you, to my audience as well, if you are somebody who's struggling with domestic violence or has been the victim of domestic violence, please make sure you reach out and speak to somebody. Either go to your GP and speak to them about it, and make sure you report or whatever you have to do just for your mental health as well. In terms of anxiety, there's different forms of mental health that's happening at the moment, and we won't have time to cover all of them. But anxiety happens to be quite common with everyone, and it's something that I speak about, something I struggled with from a very long time, and all of my coping mechanism. I think I've done everything to the max, and I can't do any more. Everything I've been doing so far, it's not working. What approaches would you suggest, Sulthana, for anyone to manage anxiety and maybe overcome it as well?
Yeah, so definitely anxiety is really common. We see it across the spectrum from kind of teenagers to elderly, men and women. It's something that everybody will struggle with at some point in their lives. I think as a GP, we kind of look at it in different tiers. So if someone comes in with anxiety initially, we will try lifestyle mechanisms. So some of the things that you've already talked about, which is the diet, exercise, lifestyle changes, trying to address whatever you're stressed about, things like that. Many times patients come back saying, I've really tried, I've done the best I can, and I'm just still anxious. This is affecting the quality of my life. I'm not able to function as I do normally. I can't continue like this. And in situations like...
I'm going to stop you right there. We're going to go for a break for literally 2 minutes. I'm going to come back to this question. It's very important we discuss this. If you guys are watching, please make sure you... message your questions, and we shall see you shortly after the break, and make sure you join us. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. And if you have joined us, we're talking to Sulthana Ahmed, a GP from Leeds. We are discussing everything around lockdown, love and self-care. If you are watching us, please join in the discussion and message us your questions or anything that you have that will help us elevate this conversation a bit more on 079 507 97017. And we have our first ever message in today. Thank you so much. I think one of the ways we can stay and be positive is to remember, inshallah, we live in a COVID-free world. Thank you for the reminder. And I think it's very important that we actually constantly remind ourselves that this is a phase and it's not going to last for so long. Sulthana, thank you so much. We were discussing it just before the break about anxiety, and you were just giving some solutions and pointers for people to take control and manage as well. So yeah, please carry on.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, when you go to your GP, the solutions to your anxiety will vary depending on how it's manifesting in you. So if you find that, you're in your head a lot, you have a lot of intrusive thoughts that you can't control, they interfere with your confidence and activities, and you need help reframing those, or you have a lot of negative thoughts that need to go away, then, we will recommend things like counselling. when people hear counselling, they just think it's one type of counselling where you lay down on a sofa and you talk about your life, and that is not what it is. There's lots of different counselling services available, and your therapist will tell you all about that. So I think that is definitely key for a lot of people. And then just very quickly, for a small group of people, anxiety actually presents with physical symptoms. So you will get things like palpitations, sweating, shortness of breath, maybe even pain. And depending on the type of symptoms you get, there are also certain medications to help with that as well that you can speak to your GP about.
And I think it goes back to the first question of understanding exercise, eating right, getting sunlight, making sure you're drinking water. Sometimes people, because they don't know what to do, or they get a bit paralyzed, so they let anxiety just grow. And speaking about it is actually the most amazing thing you can do in terms of resolving something that's probably bugging you in your head. And in neuroscience, we find anxiety is about an unpredicted thought or prediction about the future that hasn't happened. So most of the time, this is from my personal experience as well, anxiety comes from worrying too much. And if we can actually use those tools about meditating, breathing, taking a walk in nature, it helps us in a whole holistic way as well, right?
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned, the kind of uncertainty aspect and the fear. So on my Insta, I do talk a lot about different parts of your brain that are actually working to protect you. But when they go into overdrive, actually, that's what produces the anxiety, because the fear leads to certain behaviors where it tries to ensure your safety. But obviously, in this context, we know that it's not really helping it, and it adds to the problem. So sometimes talking out loud with someone, or even writing things down about what your fears are, what you're afraid of, what it is you're anxious about, can help you detangle some of those things that are going on. And obviously a counsellor or a GP can help you with those thoughts as well.
And one of the tools that I use with my clients as well is writing down a gratitude list first thing in the morning and before you go to sleep. And I mean, we have a horrible stigma towards counseling and therapy in the South Asian community. And it could essentially be the thing that saves you as well, the counseling, the therapy work. And in this lockdown, I'm assuming counseling and therapy work has been very, very, very busy. And we need to look at these other things outside of the things that we're not used to, or the things that we don't see as normal. Therapy, counseling, all of that stuff is there for a reason. And the South Asian community have created this horrible, horrible stigma. It's become taboo. Like, if you go to counseling, you go to therapy, there is something wrong with you. Yes, there's something wrong with all of us. That's why we need it.
Yeah, absolutely. There is definitely still a stigma or a taboo attached to the topic. And even if people go, they don't usually talk about it or advertise it. One really helpful thing that I think is happening is, obviously, as more of us grow up in this country, a lot of services are being tailored to cater specifically for South Asian communities. And so now, you can Google and you will find specifically, Muslim therapists or South Asian therapists that will take into account your cultural values as well when you are having therapy with them. And I've heard a lot of positive feedback about them as well.
Beautiful. I mean, as a fitness coach, I love speaking about all of this. I love speaking about creating habits, how to find inspiration, how to be your own motivation sometimes. And one of the things a lot of people are probably struggling with is this thing called motivation, which is very, very overrated in the aspect of motivation isn't something that we put in a pocket or turn on a switch and it comes to us automatically. In your opinion, what would you say are the foundations of creating new positive habits, or probably in a better way to say, adjusting your negative talk or the negative habits that you've probably practiced for so long?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and one that I kind of have a lot of discussions about with my friends and colleagues as well. So when it comes to habit and goal setting, that's actually two different areas of your brain. So the front part of your brain is involved with goal setting and achievement and things like that. And there's another part called the basal ganglia, which is in charge of automatic behavior, which is your habits. And the way that your habits are formed is over a period of time, there will be a constant cue which leads to a specific behavior. So the cue may be walking past your coffee shop that's down the road. The behavior is you going in to go get that coffee, and then the end of that cycle is the reward, where you drink the coffee, you feel really good, and then you do that every day. So in terms of adjusting existing habits or changing them, you need to identify what the cue is, what kind of triggers you to engaging in that behavior, and try and break that cue or break that cycle. So it might be taking a different route to the one that that you're used to, things like that. In terms of kind of developing a new habit and maintaining it, consistency is key. I know it sounds really cliche and people say it all the time. However, when we do something for the first time, we have to spend a lot of time thinking about it. It takes up a lot of energy. The front part of your brain is engaged, the goal setting bit. The more you do it, lots of neural pathways are strengthened, and then it gets put to the automatic bit of the brain where then you don't have to think about it a lot, and that's when it becomes a habit. So if you want to do something and you do it consistently, it will eventually become a habit as the other part of the brain takes over. So it's just trying to, motivate yourself and keep doing it to the point where you don't have to think about it anymore.
That's amazing, because they say what fires together wires together as well. And if you don't use it, you lose it, right?
Okay.
And I've been doing this 14-day reset myself, getting back on track with fitness, because I just had a spiral of meltdowns in lockdown, especially with the new year. And what I found with 14 days not having a break is teaching my brain with urgency, like, we need to survive right now, or we need to get ourselves out of this rut, sleeping late, eating junk. It doesn't help. So the moment you make an intention and a choice to change, things fall into place. And another thing I was thinking at the back of my head while you were speaking is, you have to understand what your big why is as well. And the why is what drives the deeper insight of why you're making that change. And one of the key things, I'm just going to give a few points here for people, is if you're somebody who's struggling to get started, kick-started, take time out in the calendar, maybe just do something, a small thing consistently for 14 days, 21 days, and then 60 days till it becomes a habit in the brain. And like you said, you have to keep doing it until it becomes a loop. That becomes an automatic habit, right?
Yeah. It's like when you wake up in the morning, you don't think about whether you should brush your teeth or not. You just do it because it's, you've been doing it for that long. So that's really simply the kind of physiology behind it.
Beautiful. We have a sister that just messaged us. What advice would you give to somebody who really struggles with motivation? I have become such a couch potato and struggle getting up to exercise. We just covered that. But in your personal opinion, what do you do when you feel a bit of a damp, or you don't feel like doing much, especially in the winter?
Yeah, so I think it depends on what your reasons are. So usually I get asked a lot about procrastination, like, people kind of keep delaying things or deferring things, and how is it that they can engage with the task more quickly. And what I say is, usually if the task is quite large or big, it can seem quite daunting, and so it really helps to convert the big task into really small steps. So let's say, I don't know, if you want to go to the gym and do a full session, the whole thing of, oh my gosh, actually getting to the gym sounds absolutely like a huge ordeal. However, if you say, well, let me just, I'll chunk that into smaller pieces. Let me just go get changed first. Or even if that's too big, let me just, tie up my hair. I'll just put on a jacket. Okay, fine, I'll put on my trainers. Well, I'll just go sit in the car. And so literally, if you actually do that and your brain doesn't have to think too far ahead, before you know it, you'll be at the gym or your garage gym exercising. So the next time you really want to do something, just think about the next step ahead of you, do that, and then until you reach your goal.
You are so amazing, Sulthana. I'm learning so much. It's like refreshing my own teaching and education. And I also feel like a lot of people, they are relying maybe on something externally to save them right now, right? We can sit here and moan about this situation we're in at the moment, or we can reframe whatever's going on and do the best that we can with what we have. And one of the most brilliant things I remember my therapist said to me about 5 years ago, we have become unfamiliar with happiness, right? So the idea is now to inject whatever makes you happy, go and do anything and everything, disregard anybody around you, do what you have to do. If it means you take a walk for 4 hours, if it means you want to have ice cream at 12 o'clock in moderation, you just do what you have to do to make you happy. We're gonna go on break in a very short while. And anybody who's joining us, please make sure you message us any questions, anything that you're struggling with on 079 507 97017. I'm here live on Single Muslim Live, sponsored by Muslim.com, and we're speaking to Sulthana Ahmed on lockdown, love, and self-care. And we'll see you soon. Make sure you come back and join us in a short while. A very warm welcome back. If you have just joined us, we are speaking to Sulthana Ahmed, a GP from Leeds. We're speaking everything about lockdown, self-love, and mental health. If you are joining us, please message us on 07950797017. I'm going to go straight to questions here. We have some amazing questions that have been messaged in. The first one is, first of all, thank you so much to everybody who's messaging us. We are receiving them and we're going to answer as many of them as we can. First one is, I can't see my partner because of lockdown rules and it is really taking a toll on my mental health. What advice do you have, Sulthana?
So that's that's really sad, isn't it? Where people are not able to physically meet or physically see each other. So this is tough because no matter what strategies you put in place, it's obviously just not the same. But I would say don't underestimate the power of just being able to see someone, if it's on a screen, being able to hear their voice, if it's just over the phone. A lot of my patients have actually talked about how they do activities together whilst having their partner just kind of next to them on Zoom, and after a while they forget that they're not there and it does feel like they're just present with them. So I would suggest, I think things like that where you can try and maintain connection remotely as much as you can, and just try and get creative really in the types of activities that you can do together. And my hope is that one day you can kind of look back and smile and say, oh, do you remember when we did X, Y, and Z during lockdown? So just try and create positive memories together that are not the usual going to the cinema or the restaurant, etc.
I think a lot of relationships have to really dig deep, and maybe this is make or break and how to get creative for a lot of couples. But at the same time, I've been speaking to even my closest friends who are single, who have recently divorced. Loneliness is a topic we don't really speak about either end. And I guess people who are in a committed relationship and they can't see their partners, we humans thrive off oxytocin from hugs, feeling loved, touch. We need to speak to people face to face. How do you think, on the other spectrum, people who are single, people who are feeling this deep innate loneliness, are coping? And have you had any patients like that coming in speaking about loneliness as well?
Yeah, so actually I had a young gentleman today, actually in his mid-20s, who's living alone, and his mum was in the shielding group. He's not in a relationship. His job is quite an isolated one where he works alone at night, and so he was just feeling really very lonely, and I have to say my heart went out for him, because sometimes your advice does fall short of anything significant or substantial. I think in situations like that, I'm a really big believer in just trying to reframe your thoughts and trying not to focus on the negative aspects like the loneliness or the isolation, and just trying to divert your attention to something which is more meaningful or more positive in your life, and just trying to create a substitute. I've actually started also to recommend volunteering to a lot of patients. And one of our patients actually volunteered at the COVID vaccination centres, and she loved it because she felt like she had a purpose, she did something useful, she was part of this big national strategy. And, you know, her mental health did really well as a result.
I think this is the advice I'm giving to everybody now. Volunteer at the vaccination centers. You can find love there, right? And if not, sign up to SingleMuslim.com. This is the perfect time. You've got all the energy all the time to actually filter through.
I was thinking, if you weren't using apps before, you probably most likely will be using them now, because literally it's the only way you can connect with people.
Definitely. We have another question. Thank you so much for messaging us. What advice do you have for learner drivers to be motivated and positive over driving lessons and driving tests over this pandemic? Inshallah, it doesn't take too long, and I'm sure there are more other Muslims in the UK who want to learn how to drive.
So I know there's been a lot of issues with this, and actually my sister was personally affected because a lot of her tests and lessons got delayed and the whole thing has been stretched out. I think in situations like this, it's important to focus on what you can control. A lot of the decisions about things, you know, around driving lessons or tests are out of your control. There's nothing you can do about them. And so kind of focusing on them will lower your mood. And so in those situations, it sometimes helps to just accept it is what it is and do the best you can, do the best out of a really bad situation.
Perfect. And that's something I'm just going back to another question in terms of what we were speaking about, habit and motivation. It's not always about willpower. It's a skill that we learn, and negative habits are a skill. You've been practicing it for it to become a negative habit. And then when you practice positive things, small things, it also becomes a habit as well. So with driving, it's something that we've got to keep practicing. And unfortunately, with the lockdown, I guess get creative. Go on YouTube, pretend you're in a car doing things. Imagination is wild. You can really tap into your subconscious mind and pretend you're driving a car, or just sit in the car if you have one, or somebody that will let you have the car, and just pretend a little bit. Right, Sulthana?
That's actually really good, because I read this thing recently where it said your mind can't differentiate sometimes between a real experience or a thought. So yeah, if you are actually imagining driving, hopefully when you get back in the car, God knows when, you will actually be really good.
Yeah, and I don't want to quickly. I want to quickly touch on this. They did this another experiment as well, where people playing basketball or even piano playing, and they were put into 3 groups. One was told to practice. One group was told to just imagine that they're practicing, and the other group was told to just do it once in a while here and there. And the study found people who were imagining it did just as well as the people who are really practicing it. So the power of the mind is incredible. Right?
Yeah, that's amazing, right?
Yeah. We have one question here, another one, and there's quite a delicate one, and I guess a lot of people can actually relate to this. I'm in my late 20s and I live with my parents, and I'm finding it really hard because they keep pressuring me to find a wife, which is even harder in the pandemic. Please advise. And I guess we're speaking about mental health in men as well, in that perspective, for the pressure of getting married in an Asian household. I'm going to throw this over to you, Sulthana.
Yeah, so again, this is quite common, and even pre-pandemic, I used to hear lots of stories, and a few patients talk about how, there was a lot of pressure on them to marry before a certain age, with a certain type of person, a certain type of ethnicity. So there's always been lots of different pressures. What's difficult with COVID is there seems to be physically no way for you to actually fulfill that kind of goal of getting married because you're not able to meet or see anyone. Stuff like this is really difficult, and I think communication is key. And again, it sounds really cliche, but if you are being pressured by your parents or other family members, and you're either not feeling it, you don't see a way forward, or maybe you just don't feel like it because mentally you're not up for it. I think it's important to be open with them and frank and share what your thoughts are, what your concerns are, what your desires are, because ultimately it's your life, it's your potential spouse or husband, etc. A lot of patients or people of South Asian ethnicity also say that they really struggle to have that conversation with their parents. They may not have such an open relationship, in which case I would say there will be a family member, a cousin, an uncle, a relative, somebody that you might be able to communicate through them, to speak to your parents instead, to hopefully back off and just explain the nature of the situation. That's probably the first kind of initial starting point that I would recommend, is an open, frank conversation.
And I guess I'm assuming as well, for a lot of South Asian men, it's really hard to speak about things that we females probably, we find it a bit more easier to speak about these things with our girlfriends on the phone call and everything. And the advice really is for men to actually find a support group, whether it is on Facebook, reach out to people that they can trust, and actually talk about this, because mental health in men and suicide rates in men are actually very, very high. And the South Asian community are not that far behind when it comes to these kind of issues like mental health and suicide rates. It's just because we don't speak about it so much, or we have this embarrassment, the shame that covers it, and it's not like really out there. What advice would you give to people who are really, really like struggling through this major thing of, the anxiety that's been created in lockdown? We've got nowhere to go right now. What can they do rather than talking in that initial state?
I think if you are a male, you're South Asian, and you're really struggling with your mental health, that is definitely a difficult place to be, because there's a general stigma around mental health, and even more so if you are male, because they are stereotypically meant to be strong, a bit stoic, and not be very emotional. There are specific services available for men with mental health issues, and if you're not able to speak to your family members about it and you are really struggling, it's affecting your day-to-day, then absolutely pick up the phone and speak to your GP about it. There will be lots of different types of help available depending on what you want to do, and obviously any phone call conversation with your GP is confidential. I think the moment you start speaking to your friends and wider family members, people then start coming out with their own stories. Oh, this is what happened to me, and this is what happened to so-and-so. And before you know it, probably more people than you realize in your own circle have gone through the same thing. I think it's just about also courage and speaking out and normalizing the issue. I think that's something that we need to focus on as well as a community.
That's really interesting, Sulthana, because these are the sensitive topics that I love having these discussions with people like yourself, that we need to address and air more and more. And I think people may be reluctant to share their stories, but it's important we come out there and actually share it so we don't feel alone. We will be going on a break in a very short time, but we will be coming back and speaking about, is social media having a negative effect on people's well-being in terms of body image and how you're looking at the moment in pandemic? I'm sure a lot of us, myself included, have put on a lot of weight. So please make sure you join us and come back and message us on 07907 97017. Welcome back, and guys, we're speaking to Sulthana Ahmed, a GP from all the way from Leeds. We're discussing lockdown, love and self-care. Please message us all of your questions on 079 097 Sultana, thank you so much. We've discussed so much already in a short space of 45 minutes. And in this section, I really want to get your actual advice about a delicate topic again. And in the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic last year, I remember there were so many free fitness apps. YouTubers were just going crazy. Instagram was just blowing up with free workouts, and everybody was just on working out. I mean, I saw more parks with people working out, taking walks, especially ethnic minority people, which was amazing to see. But do you think the rise of social media, especially the rise of free workouts here and there, left, right, and center, has had an effect on men and females' mental health and how they're perceiving their body image right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we were growing up, there were just the magazine covers if you went to a shop or grocery store, etc. Whereas now I feel like it's with you wherever you go on your phone. And I think it's one thing knowing that, well, this isn't perfect, this isn't real, these images are photoshopped and I shouldn't aim for that. It's one thing knowing that, but you will still get affected by it because you won't be able to consciously say that every time you see an image. So I think, especially if people have been present on social media, probably more so than ever before, because a lot of people are at home and they are being bombarded with all these images of perfection, in quotation marks. And absolutely, you will end up comparing yourself to those images and then feeling quite down about yourself. So yeah, and especially in younger generation who kind of don't know any different and have grown up with this, and it's almost part of their lifestyle. I see a lot of young teenagers with body image issues or even kind of eating disorders, and a lot of it stems from unrealistic expectations set by social media.
So many valid points. One of the ones you made right now is the beauty standards we have, because everybody who has a social media platform, we all have access to our own opinion, what's going on in our head. We just jot it out, boom, it goes out in there to the world. And it's in a way kind of cathartic in a way, because on one hand, we're trying to just get through this pandemic. And on the other hand, people have so much time to actually waste time, the key word being time, on social media. What do you think are the practical steps people can take? I have to listen to this advice myself because I get drawn into it. What would you say from a GP's perspective? What kind of steps can people take to actually cure the mental or help the mental health, not cure it?
Yeah, so I think the first step would be to take control of your social media kind of page and really look at who you are following and why are you following them. And if it's simply, celebrities where you like the way they look or their body, or they're not really adding any value to your life, just making you feel bad about yourself, I would just remove them, stop following them, and just try and limit the number of those types of images that you expose yourself to. And then the next step, I would say, on social media specifically, would be to then maybe following accounts that are a bit more nurturing to your soul, that are a bit more helpful or realistic, and at least because your brain is constantly receiving that information. So I think it's useful to control what type of information you expose yourself to. And it's simply also like when people get anxious about their news, I tell them you need to set a limit to how much news you're consuming, because it's not doing you any favors. I think it's a similar process with social media and body image as a starting point anyway.
I have this saying where if you're not brainwashing yourself, the people who control the media are going to brainwash you for you. So you have a choice. And I guess we have an addictive relationship to our phones, and especially in lockdown, it's become our best friend in so many different ways to stay connected, make sure we're up to date what's going on around the world. And again, your solutions are very very practical to give to us. And even for me, just delete or mute people or move away or just take a social media break just to refresh yourself and come back to yourself. One of the things you just touched on was eating disorders. And this is something I struggled with in my teen years. And last year, it flared up a bit. And I had to take notice of what was going on. Do you have many people that are coming to you in regards of eating disorders? And what advice would you give to them at the initial point if they are feeling a bit overwhelmed or something's not going right for them?
Yeah, I think as humans, our relationship with food is so complex because, it's a necessity, it's nourishing, our body needs it, but it's also got a lot of significance in terms of culture or health or junk food. So there's lots of emotions attached with food. And I know, and you will probably know this as well, in youngsters when their eating disorders start, it's usually related to control. They want to be able to control some form of something in their life, and what they consume is something that they have power over. When I have young people coming to me with kind of eating disorders, I do tend to kind of see them in I tend to follow them up regularly because it's such a complex consultation. Yeah, I can't, sort it in 10 minutes. And I think trying to get to know the patient, understanding their relationship with food, and also understanding their social situation and what's happened to give rise to this type of behavior. As a GP, that's quite important for me to understand. And then obviously we have lots of eating disorder kind of community services available that will help to try and encourage positive messages around food and body image as well. It's a slow process. It's a really difficult process and sometimes quite painful for the family to witness as well. But there is lots of support available for it too.
That's so interesting. I had a client that messaged me. We were on a call actually, and she's now 35 years old. And that was the first time on Monday when we were conversing, she had actually admitted to a complete stranger that she had an eating disorder. And she just burst into tears. And I guess a lot of us growing up in Asian household, because we don't see it as an issue or a topic, because it's mostly focused on the Western Caucasian female as an eating disorder, we don't address it at home. And one of the key things is parents need to pay attention to their child's eating behavior, all of a sudden maybe excessive exercising. What advice would you give to parents in this situation when it comes to looking after young teenage females or even guys at the moment? Because eating disorders is increasing in men and we don't talk about it at all.
Yeah, so the balance is really difficult to strike for parents because you want the child to have independence and feel supported, and you don't want to be overbearing at the same time, but you also just want them to eat properly and become healthier. There's lots of little tips that parents can try and adopt. I think having open conversations, frank conversations with their child about the state of their mental health and what makes them feel happy or sad. But also, I'm a big believer in trying to nurture other positive experiences with your child so they don't feel like they're constantly being observed or examined or looked over, and just trying to create positive memories like watching a movie together, going for a walk together. It's really strengthening that connection and that bond with your child so that they can then feel more comfortable to maybe open up without you having to ask them all the time. I spoke to a pediatrician recently, and she talked about kind of parents and teenagers coming together and maybe forming set menus. It gives the teenagers some control over what goes on the menus, and a bit of predictability, like they know what type of food they can have. And sometimes that's a really good starting point as well, where both parties can come together, work in agreement as to kind of how to improve. So the menu thing usually works really well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that expertise and your knowledge as well. And we're coming to a close very soon, but I have one lovely question for Sulthana, and that is, speaking to you about self-love, what are your pointers about loving yourself in this pandemic, and what can you do to love yourself and nourish yourself a bit more?
Well, I was thinking about self-love and confidence, and I think self-acceptance is huge. Like accepting who you are, as you are, where you are in this point in your life, and not comparing yourself to others is probably the best thing you can do for yourself during this pandemic. You know, you have your own life, you have your own identity, your own purpose, and you're on your own journey. And I think the moment you start accepting that, it it's infectious. People see it, they believe it, and then in turn, you know, you feel more kind of energized to continue the way you are. Um, I think, yeah, it starts from you. It starts from within, and you just need to kind of find the power to love yourself and spend time with yourself.
Sultana, I loved having this conversation. I can speak to you all night. Thank you so much. There's been amazing, amazing discussions here. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's tuned in. But if there has been any topics that has been raised here and it's affected anybody, please make sure that you can find support at britishmuslim.tv/support. So make sure you guys tune in next week. We have another show. Thank you so much to my guest, Fahima Bassett. It has been a pleasure having you on today's show. If you guys have any questions from today's discussion, we'd still love to hear from you. Please message us on 079-507-97017, or just message us and just let us know what we can talk next week, what issues, what topics to discuss as well. So I hope everybody had a good time tuning in, and I shall catch up with you next week. We have another amazing guest, and today, Nazia Khatun, along with the whole team at British TV, a huge thank you for joining us. Assalamu alaikum. And no, I said Fahima. I don't know why I said Fahima. It's Sulthana Ahmed. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. And I really, really hope that we can get out of this really quickly. And if you guys have any questions, please also follow Sulthana Ahmed on Instagram. And I shall see you next week.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.